Hi, fifth grade readers. We're going to read the paired passage practice. You can listen to either of these passages multiple times or hit pause. Passage number 1, the race to invent the telephone. Ring, ring. As you race to answer your cell phone, consider this. The invention of the telephone in 1876 was itself a race. In fact, the winner of the race wasn't declared until 1893, 17 years later. Of course, almost everyone knows the telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell. But have you ever heard of Johann Reis? He invented a kind of telephone in 1861, but he never developed it to the point where it was able to send and receive speech that could be understood. What about Elisha Gray? He filed a notice of invention with the Patent Office on the same day that Bell filed his patent application. The term patent refers to a right granted by the government to anyone who invents or discovers a new process or machine. If Bell had the patent, he would have had the right to make and sell the telephone for a set number of years. Gray would not. Gray's telephone, however, had a major problem. The human voice wasn't clear. Bell was the first to send words that could be understood. On March 10, 1876, Bell spilled some acid and called his assistant by speaking into the phone he was working on. "Watson, come here, I need you." But then Bell had even more competition from Thomas Edison, who invented an improved transmitter. This is the part of the telephone that sends your voice. All in all, Bell was involved in more than 600 lawsuits defending the patent for his invention. He won the last suit in 1893. It's a picture of Alexander Graham Bell on the right. Passage 2, Alexander Graham Bell. Alexander Graham Bell was born on March 3, 1847 in Edinburgh, Scotland. His father was a teacher and an expert in public speaking. His grandfather, Alexander Bell, was an elocution professor who taught public speaking. Bell's mother, Eliza, was hard of hearing but became an accomplished pianist as well as a painter. After studying at the University of Edinburgh and University College, London, England, Bell became his father's assistant. In 1870, his parents, in search of a healthier climate, convinced Bell to move with them to Canada. The following year, he went to Boston, Massachusetts to teach at Sarah Fuller's School for the Deaf, the first school for deaf people in the world. From 1873 to 1876, Bell experimented with many inventions. These included an electric speaking telegraph, or what later became known as the telephone. In 1874, he invented a telegraph that could send several messages at once over one wire. Bell supplied the ideas, and his assistant, Thomas Watson, created the equipment. Working with tuned reeds and magnets to make a receiving instrument and sender work together, they transmitted a musical note on June 2, 1875. Bell's telephone receiver and transmitter were identical, a thin disc in front of a magnet. Bell continued his experiments to improve the telephone's quality. By accident, Bell sent the first message, "Watson, come here, I need you," on March 10, 1876. The first public showing took place at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Convention in Boston 2 months later. Then, in June, Bell's display at a fair in Philadelphia brought more publicity. Emperor Dom Pedro II of Brazil ordered 100 phones for his country. The telephone, which had only been given 18 words in the official catalog of the fair, suddenly became the shining star among all the other attractions. You can pause here. You can listen to either one of those passages over again, or you can listen to these questions be read out loud. Number 1, these two selections are about A, Thomas Edison and the invention of the telephone. B, Alexander Graham Bell and the invention of the telephone. C, why Elisha Gray's telephone was superior to Bell's. D, how to apply for a patent. Number 2, what information does the first selection contain that is not mentioned in the second selection? So if you're setting up your T-chart for question 2, you should be having P1 have a check and P2 having an X. A, Alexander Bell's first message over the telephone. B, Emperor Dom Pedro's second order of the 100 telephones. C, why Bell said "Watson, come here" on March 10, 1876. D, Bell's experiments with many inventions from 1873 to 1876. Question 3. What does the reader learn about Alexander Graham Bell only in the second selection? So for your T chart, you should have a X for passage 1 and a check for passage 2. A. Bell's father was a teacher. B. Bell had an assistant named Thomas Watson. C. Bell had a lot of competition from Thomas Edison. D. Bell was born in Scotland. Question 4. In what ways are the two selections alike? A. They are both written from the third person point of view. B. Both are biographies of Alexander Graham Bell. C. They both give information about Bell's teaching career. D. They are both written from the first person point of view. So a reminder, for your T-chart, you should have checks for both P1 and P2 for this question. Also a reminder that third person point of view means a narrator outside of the story. First person point of view means using pronouns like I and me, where the narrator is in the story. Question 5. Which sentence from the selections best represents a theme that both selections share? Remember, a theme is a message or a lesson the author wants you to learn. You would be looking for a T-chart that has both check marks for passage 1, P1, and passage 2, P2. A. Of course, almost everyone knows that the telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell. B. But then Bell had even more competition from Thomas Edison, who invented an improved transmitter. C. From 1873 to 1876, Bell experimented with many inventions. D. Bell supplied the ideas and his assistant Thomas Watson created the equipment. Question 6. One difference between the author's purposes in the two selections is that in the first selection, the author mainly focuses on. So in this question, when you go to set up your T-chart, you're wanting to look for a difference. So that means that the first selection, P1, you're going to be looking for a check, versus P2, you're going to be looking for an X. A. Alexander Graham Bell's inventions. B. The invention of the telephone. C. Thomas Edison's inventions. D. The invention of the patent. When you're done listening and answering these questions on the right, you're going to hit review and finish test and tell me finished in the chat. Good luck.